Welcome to the Proceedings podcast. I'm Bill Hamblet, the editor-in-chief of Proceedings at the U.S. Naval Institute. Today is Tuesday, 10 June 2025. Good as always to have you on board, everyone. Today's episode is brought to you by Booz Allen. Booz Allen delivers outcomes with speed for the nation's most critical defense priorities. Work with solution engineers who use AI, cyber, and quantum to help warfighters collaborate faster with allies and partners from the open seas to the edge of space. Learn more at boozallen.com/defense. All right, my guest today is Navy Reserve Lieutenant Gary Kim. He's the 2024 Proceedings Author of the Year, and his most recent contribution to our pages is titled Lessons from Japan and South Korea's Submarine Builders. It's in the June issue of Proceedings, and it's part of our ongoing series on shipbuilding. Gary, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Bill. Thanks for having me today.
All right. It's awesome. This is a great article. I remember when we read it earlier this year in its initial draft, and I was blown away by the way, especially for me initially, the way the Japanese build and then manage the size of their submarine fleet. So let's just start with some background on the Japanese and South Korean Navy's submarine forces. So briefly describe their submarines, how many, how capable are they? And you've got some slides to show us to sort of illuminate all of that. So let's go to the slides.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, happy to talk about the Japanese and the Korean submarine industrial base. So basically, this is generally the outline of what I'm going to be talking about, and go straight into the Japanese side first. So first of all, the Japanese and the Korean fleet are all diesel electric or conventional submarines. Some have AIP, some don't have AIP, some have vertical launch, the VLS, and some don't. But this isn't really to talk about whether we should buy diesel subs or not. I think that's been covered extensively in other platforms, but I really want to talk about how they build and how they sustain their fleet. So starting the Japanese fleet, you start with the Oyashio, the Shoryu, and then the Taige class, which are all iterations of a design, and they constantly improve their fleet. They currently have 26 boats in the water. 23 of them are operational submarines. Two of their older submarines are training submarines, so they qualify their sailors on a training submarine before they send them to the fleet. And then one of them, one of the newer ones, the Taige, is actually a test bed submarine, so where they're testing their weapons and their sensor systems. Let me move on to the Korean system, or the Korean fleet. The Korean fleet currently have 21, or I've heard, I don't know when the 22nd boat is going to be put in the water. But their current fleet size goal is 27. It consists of three classes: the Changbogo, Sonwonil, and then the Anchangho class. Interestingly, their type KSS-1 and KSS-2s are license copies or license builds of what the German 209 and 214s. And the KSS-3 is the first pure domestic size design submarines. Again, most of them they're all diesel electric. The KSS-3s actually have VLS on them, and don't know the exact details, but they are part of the what Korea's retaliation strategy against if the North Koreans use nuclear weapons. So really important part of Korea's submarine fleet and also their strategic deterrent.
Got it. Okay. And these are they're known as really world-class diesel electric submarines in both navies. Very modern, and as you said, they continue to modernize the designs as they go and as they build them. Your article is more focused on how they build their submarines and how they manage their force structure. So starting with Japan, what's unique about their approach to submarine building?
Yeah, so I'll start by explaining the Japanese system. So they started building submarines in the 1950s, and then from about the late 60s and 70s on, they've built one submarine every year, um, switching between Mitsubishi's Kobe yard and Kawasaki's Kobe yard. So every March they'll commission a submarine, and each yard will alternate commissioning a submarine every year. So one yard is building one every 2 years. Um, and how they actually sustain their fleet size is that they'll decommission a submarine very early in their career if they feel that that's what the force size they need. So, for example, if you're at one submarine built per year and you need a fleet size of 20, you're going to decommission your submarine at 20 years old. If you need it to last 25 years, you'll decommission at 25, and they could basically extend that all the way up to your 30, 35-year lifespan without really having to strain their production system. Um, And so you'll see that on there. So this is one of the kind of my data poll I did was I took um, basically the entire Japanese submarine fleet and looked at what age they decommissioned their submarines at. So what you'll see is that during the Cold War, they grew their fleet, and during the peace dividend era, they basically sustained their one submarine per year production rate and simply continue to decommission submarines at 15, 16, 17 years of age. So you'll actually see a decline in the age of their submarines. And then that's how they kept their industrial base alive. And then over the last couple of years, as you know, China resurged, as they intrinsically feel the Chinese threat, they have basically increased their fleet size by simply delaying retirements by a year. I don't think people realize how ingenious this is, and also, frankly, how unique of a system this is. I don't think anyone in the Navy, in the U.S. Navy right now, would be like, "Yeah, let's decommission a submarine with 15 years of life left in it." But the Japanese do it, and it's very core to their strategy.
Yeah, and I just want to point out a couple things because it really surprised me when I first read this, and then I reread it. Two things that sort of jumped out at me, right, is that as you point out, if you want to have 20 submarines in your fleet and you build one every year, then you're going to retire them at 20 years, right? You just pointed out, and then if you decide 1 year or for a period of a couple of years, yeah, we actually need to have 22, 23. Then you keep them for a couple more years. They don't plan to do a midlife overhaul on their boats, so they don't plan to keep them for 30 or 30 more years, right? They could, but it's very expensive. So it's just like in healthcare, the last 5, 10 years of somebody's life are the most expensive. It is that way with ships too. The longer you keep them, the more you spend on maintenance towards the end of their lives. But by keeping the industrial base is kept happy, and it moves at a very good, steady, consistent pace, because they build one per year in each of those shipyards, right? Or sorry, one every other year in each of those shipyards. And so you don't have what you see in a similar chart of the U.S. Navy submarine fleet, where we were building 4 submarines, 4 SSNs or so per year in the 1980s, and then in the 1990s we were building like one every couple of years. And so the industrial base let shipyard workers go. We went through this huge downsizing, and then when the demand signal came back, or has come back, building back to that production capacity of trying to get to 2 SSNs and 1 SSBN per year has been incredibly painful to get back to that level. So to me, I just, when you put this in your article and you send it to us, I was like, that is really ingenious. So yeah, it's brilliant. So let's move on to how the South Koreans do it.
Yeah, so I don't have a separate slide for the South Korean strategy, but basically, it's generally, I think it's a little simpler than the Japanese strategy. Their fleet's a lot younger,
Yeah.
and I don't think they have a succession plan of how they will decommission their boats to maintain their fleet size, but their story of how they built a sizable submarine fleet on a very tight budget. So if you look at the Korean military's force structure, they're an army-centric force, and their navy's only been getting like a hefty investment in the last maybe 20, 30 years. And their first ocean-going submarine was actually not built in Korea, despite what we think of how robust their shipbuilding capabilities are. And they were basically built in Germany and sailed down to South Korea. And then the next couple were actually built off of kits that were sent in from Germany. Since then, first of all, that's how they saved on their initial design costs by just simply buying a foreign boat. And then the second leg of that strategy is, I think, their export strategy. So they will sell up and down the submarine industrial capacity. So they will do, because I think there's about 70-ish boats in the 209 class across dozens of navies in the world. So they can go to multiple navies and sell work and sell maintenance to those fleets, and they have successfully done that. I know they've done that to the Indonesian Navy. They've done that to the Peruvian Navy, and to the Indonesian Navy, they've actually just straight up sold 209 class submarines to them and beat out their original builders in Germany. So
Wow.
I think that I think the choice to go buy a off-the-shelf, commonly used design was critical in not only saving costs but also defraying costs in the future by using their export strategy. I think now they're in a mature place where their KSS-3 program is quite robust. So, to my understanding, they're bidding for the Canadian submarine program and aggressively marketing towards it.
Got it.
And one other part that I think is unique is that the Korean industrial base works really closely with their government and provides a bespoke service to that's like kind of miles beyond even what the U.S. FMS teams do out in the field. Um, uh, One example, this is not a naval example, but this is more of a land systems example, is that um, when Poland gave away much of its tanks and howitzers to the Ukrainian army, and they were gapped, they went to the Koreans. They made a contract for tanks and self-propelled guns, and usually you would have to get back in the line and get those slots of your production lines maybe 2 years later. The South Korean the defense contractors convinced the South Korean governments to basically give up the South Korean army's modernization um, lots, and then basically borrow from. So they broke a contract with the South Korean army, took their production from that year and gave to the Polish, and the South Korean government basically told its army to be like, "Hey, this is for the greater good. This is to bolster our national industry. This is to bolster our customer relationships." And the South Korean army simply had to say "aye, aye, sir" to their secretary and move along. So I think the other unique part of the South Korean strategy is how integrated the government, the military, and and the industrial base is.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. So you've touched on this a bit, but I want to dig a little deeper on the industrial base in each country. So they've managed to avoid those fits and starts that have plagued U.S. shipbuilding. On the Japanese side, it was by having that constant demand. We are going to build one submarine every year, and that kept two
Mhm.
yards going on with every other or 2 year centers, if you will.
Mhm.
And then you mentioned that the South Koreans they had a mature design that they bought from the Germans, and then they've continued to improve on that, so they weren't starting from scratch to design their own submarine.
Mhm.
We'll talk a little bit about for both countries, because I know this has been discussed a lot about the Chinese shipbuilding and how Chinese commercial shipbuilding has benefited the naval shipbuilding. Do you see similar trends in Japan and South Korea, where they've used their consistent naval or sorry, their commercial shipbuilding prowess and the size of that industry to benefit their navies?
So I know that's the kind of prevailing narrative on why we need to grow a commercial a naval industrial base, but I do think there are benefits, or certainly I don't go against the thought that, hey, for us to be a maritime power, we need a commercial and shipbuilding industry.
Yeah.
But I think that correlation is a little it, I think we read too much into that correlation. So if you look at both the Japanese and the Korean shipbuilders, I'll take for example the Japanese. Their Kobe yard, where they build the submarines, is a completely air-gapped a business unit within Mitsubishi or Kawasaki. They only employ Japanese citizens. They only build submarines, and it is basically a business unit and an industrial base that's dedicated to the submarines.
Got it.
Same with their surface ships. Their majority of the surface ships are built in Nagasaki, and that yard only builds naval vessels. On the Korean side, HD Hyundai, their Korean yard, their commercial yard, and the military yard sits in the same city, but they are air gapped in terms of who works in them, which customers are in them, and they are two separate industrial supply chains, industrial bases. I think we do need to regrow our commercial shipbuilding base, but the military naval shipbuilding base will be costly, and it needs to be funded entirely for the sake that I call it the price of admiralty. If we want to sustain naval superiority, we need to pay for that industrial base in full and not expect us to be able to save costs by defraying it with commercial shipbuilding.
Gotcha. Gotcha. You've got a couple of other slides to show us. So let's click through a couple of those, and I'll probably have some questions for you as we keep going.
Uh, yep. So I think you mentioned this that we went from building four SSNs to zero for a while, and then we are struggling to build it back. So I'm a so I'm a mechanical engineer by trade, but I also minored in history in college. And when we read history, especially I think it's Francis Fukuyama's really famous work where he declares the end of history when we won the Cold War. And I'm a big proponent that thinks, hey, history really matters, and what historians put out really has consequences up and down, even to the Navy. So I think that kind of brought on this like ebullient environment where we're like, hey, great power conflict is no longer, it's behind us, and we succumb to that temptation that we have finished history, and we decided to not build high-end capabilities for a span of about 5 years. So you'll see down here, I call it the U.S. Navy succumbing to temptation. If
That's
I
a
would,
great way to put it. That is a great way to put it. I think and it wasn't just the Navy. I would say at a higher level, at a presidential level and congressional level too. There was this desire to find a peace dividend, right? But it is, but succumbing to temptation is a brilliant way to
yeah.
put it. I think. Yeah.
And if I may roll back one more slide, and I'm going to point out to that same period in Japan from 1990 to 2000. The Japanese don't succumb to temptation. I think that they read into China's rise. I think they read into the persistent North Korean threat, and they understood that they didn't need to grow their fleet size, but they needed to nonetheless sustain a credible high-end maritime fighting force. So you
Yeah.
won't see that succumbing in the Japanese industrial base.
Great point.
Yeah, and then and then to the to the right, we when we should have started to ramp up. I think that's when Dr. Holmes wrote the first edition, and I think sometime between the first and the second edition of Red Star over the Pacific. I consider second edition of Red Star of the Pacific that moment when we should have, or when we really needed to really wake up. So um, I think we do ramp up, but certainly not fast enough or not hard enough. And that is something that I'm trying to solve personally my professional level and also kind of and at the scholarly level too. And
Yeah,
then I'll
if I could, Gary, if I could, I just point out that that you just graduated from the Wharton Business School. So after you left the
no,
Navy, right?
I'm halfway through.
Oh, you're halfway through. Okay, got
Yeah.
it, got it, got it. So you're halfway through Wharton Business School. But that was and when I met you the first time a few years ago, and you were trying to decide whether you wanted to stay in or get out of the Navy, and you decided to get out and pursue business school. You stayed in the Navy Reserve, but I know that you've been pursuing in business school this problem set, right? The American industrial base, the shipbuilding industrial base. This is something
Mhm.
that you're passionate about pursuing. Um, Now that you're outside the Navy, but sort of back, and having an influence on it in your life going forward, which I applaud. So
Thank you. So I do. That's actually kind of what I do want to talk about one more time.
cool.
Is that I think there's a certain type of doom and gloom to the fact that we can't build subs or we can't or and I'm actually I think one and a half standard deviations more positive looking forward than the norm. And I've told this in private to a lot of my friends and my colleagues, but I would like to talk to it in a more public platform. So there's a couple of reasons I think weird things are looking up in our submarine industrial base. So um, the baby boomer retirement wave is behind us, in my opinion, and which especially on the industrial front. And I think that means the worst is behind us. So this is a story from my internship when I was in college. So we had it was a tier one supplier that supplied wing components to Boeing, and there was a massive flock of engineers that got hired in 1988, 1989, at, and they had stayed in for a while. And then from about the early 90s to about 2015 to 2018, like they didn't have to hire engineers because there was no defense demand, and I was kind of going to be one of the first engineers that they were going to start hiring. So there was this giant 3 decade gap in I guess engineers, builders, and professionals in the aerospace defense stage. And since then, we've been quickly hiring people. The industry has been quickly hiring people, but faster than they've been hiring, and faster than uh, people in my generation have been upskilling and moving up into management. Baby boomers have retired. Uh, some of Yeah, you could be a 65-year-old engineer making designs of airfoils, but you can't be a 65-year-old shipbuilder. That's a hard work. And and I think that wave has gone past us. And on the positive end, Gen Z is commonly known as the tool belt generation. Not many of them are going to college. Many of them are going to trade school, going to community college, getting certifications to go into in more industrial settings. And I think that is going to show its dividends. And I think the generation slightly above the Gen Zers, the late millennials like myself, are moving into management and moving into those critical roles that the baby boomers left. And I think we are going to be able to build back a good industrial base in the next decade or so. And on the other side, on also the other end, the Columbia class, don't know how it's going, but I shouldn't know how it's going that deeply. But that is real industrial capacity that is being drummed up right now. And when that finishes, whether they convert that industrial base into SSN productions or if they're going to be making SSGNs out of the same hulls, whatever happens, it is good industrial base that is going to be able to be redirected into the SSN production base. So I think those are all great trend, and also SecNav, the president, SecNav are laser focused on shipbuilding, which is, I think, which is a great trend. And I would like to remind everyone that that trend it's bipartisan. It endures through administration. So I'm hoping that continues, and I think those are great reasons to be positive.
Yeah, I think you make some good points there, and I would refer our listeners and viewers back to an episode a couple of months ago in March of this year. I had the great privilege to be invited up to General Dynamics electric boat facilities in Quonset Point, Rhode Island, and in Groton, Connecticut, with Rear Admiral Todd Weeks, who's PEO Strategic Submarines. And we did they gave me an amazing tour of that facility that's shown where the Columbia class on your slide. I got to see exactly that. And they're building Columbia class. There's elements of Columbia class and Virginia class being built side by side. And I was very impressed by what I saw, by the work that's being done. And then when the executives in the company talked about workforce issues, they said it's a challenge, but there's a lot of there are a lot of initiatives to mature the workforce, to bring in new workers, to train them. They're coming up with some new innovative ways to do that. And it's not just General Dynamics electric boat, but I know down in Newport News are doing that, at Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, and other shipbuilding companies. There's a lot of partnership with technical schools, vocational schools around the country, to get at some of your point. And I love the fact that you said that you are 1.5 standard deviations more positive than most of your peers. That is a great phrase.
Yes, I am, and I think it would be hard to want to be in this field if I wasn't positive about it. So yes, certainly.
Good point. Good point. So let's go through a couple more of your slides, and we'll just
Yeah.
keep the conversation going.
Yeah, so I think this is the last of my slides.
Okay.
So the article suggests it is a forward-looking suggestion. I make the assumption that our workforce builds up, our industrial capacity builds up to be able to meet the demands of our end strength goal. Um, I will do my best to get us there, both as a writer and also as a person, as an industry person. But I do want to suggest a industrial based model that hybridizes the Korean and the Japanese strategies for us in the U.S. So what I'm suggesting is that we need to ramp up to 3 SSNs per year to meet our I think 66 boat global force requirement. And the other ones I suggest is that we do not perform a midlife overhaul. And I think that's possible because to my understanding, the Virginia classes are being built with the life of the boat reactors. And I suggest that we use early decommissionings to control the fleet size. And if we reach 3 boats per year, we will be able to decommission boats at a 25-year mark, and also have slack capacity to accept some delays, and also even export boats to our foreign allies. And and my personal opinion is that I know that AUKUS is designing a very bespoke a boat, but I think that we should just simply uh, be selling Virginias to Australia, and also potentially to critical allies like Korea, Japan, and Singapore that could use that exquisite nuclear submarine capabilities. And the graphic here that I show here is that of the strategies. Let's basically anchor our production at 3 boats per year, and then we could use a sliding scale of, if the threat increases and we need more boats, we could increase the service life and stop exports, and then we could reasonably bring the fleet size to 90 boats, which is almost 50% greater than what we have right now. Let's say for one reason or the other, the threat decreases. We could decommission boats at 20 years and then maybe increase some of our export capacities, and that would get us down to something like 50. So I really want to hammer down, hey, let's stabilize production, and no matter what the global environment becomes, let's not fall into the temptation of stopping production, and um, let's use service lengths and early decommissionings to adjust our end strength.
Got it. Got it. Well, those were great slides. Um, let's come back to the side-by-side view. There we go. I just have one more question for you. So I know that, as a naval officer, you were stationed over in Japan for a bit. You're of Korean descent, and you did a lot of research on this in both countries. So just talk about that a little bit. How did you come to know about how Japan and South Korea manage their build and manage their submarine forces? What was some of the research that you did?
So first of all, I guess so when I was stationed in Sasebo, Sasebo it's one of the four old Imperial Japanese Navy bases, and it's the growing base where, because of the Chinese threat, so Sasebo almost feels like Japan's San Diego or Japan's Norfolk. So there's hundreds, there's many Navy officers out there, and because it's kind of far away from Tokyo, many of the senior officers keep their families in Tokyo and geo bachelor down in Sasebo. So it means they have a lot of time after work. The izakayas are full. It's not hard to grab a captain and grab a beer with them in the evenings, because hey, his family's up in Tokyo, and he's living a more or less of a bachelor lifestyle. And I'll run into them in the coin laundry. I'll run into them for beers, and they'll teach me Japanese, and I teach them English, and then you form those relations, and then you get to really learn how they do business in the Japanese JMSDF. On the Korean side, it was more of a literature research based on what I was able to read, because I'm able to read and write in Korean, which really helps. So I did a lot of the research through journals, through diving into publications, and especially with the go-to-market strategy. I had a chance to to be able to connect and call with Taebyung Kim, who works for the Korean government agency that promotes Korean exports, and he basically gave me a rundown of how the Korean government goes to market with these firms, and that really helps do my business. So definitely, to sum it up, it's language skills, and it's typically a lot of Navy officers with a lot of time in the evenings really help do research like this.
Yeah, those are great stories. Again, the value of those personal relationships with our allies and with our partners, it really pays off. So, Gary, this has been just a great conversation. It's a wonderful article. My guest is Lieutenant Gary Kim, U.S. Navy Reserve. He's a frequent contributor to Proceedings and our author of the year for 2024. His latest article in the June issue of Proceedings is titled Lessons from Japan and South Korea's Submarine Builders. Gary, thanks again for writing for Proceedings again and for being on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much. Looking forward to more articles. And I think we've talked about it. My next one's going to be on labor force issues. And so I will let you know when I finish that up.
Nice, nice. Okay. Well, this episode is brought to you by Booz Allen. Booz Allen delivers outcomes with speed for the nation's most critical defense priorities. Work with solution engineers who use AI, cyber, and quantum to help warfighters collaborate faster with allies and partners. From the open seas to the edge of space, learn more at boozallen.com/defense. And until next episode, remember, victory begins at the Naval Institute.